Captain Lee Hyunwoo pressed his palm against the cool metal of the bridge window, his breath fogging the reinforced glass as he stared at the thing waiting for them in the darkness of space. The beacon was enormous, easily the size of a small moon, its ancient hull scarred by millions of years of cosmic radiation and micro-meteor impacts. Strange symbols covered every visible surface, glowing with that eerie red light that seemed to pulse like a dying heartbeat. "Sir, that thing is giving me the creeps," muttered Pilot O.C. Jin from his position at the helm controls. His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted their approach vector. "My grandmother always said red lights in space meant death." Captain Lee didn't respond immediately. He had been commanding deep space vessels for 15 years, and in all that time, he had never encountered anything quite like this. The beacon wasn't just old, it was impossibly ancient, predating human civilization by tens of thousands of years. Yet here it was, still functioning, still broadcasting its warning to anyone foolish enough to venture this far into unexplored space. Communications. Officer Park Min-ji looked up from her console, her face pale in the red glow of the beacon's light. "Captain, I'm getting something on all frequencies. The signal is incredibly powerful. It's overriding our standard communications array." "Put it through the speakers," Lee ordered, settling back into his command chair. The synthetic leather creaked under his weight as he gripped the armrests. The bridge speakers crackled to life, and suddenly the air was filled with voices. Hundreds of them, speaking in languages both familiar and utterly alien. The message began in perfect Korean, the words crisp and clear despite their obvious age. "Turn back. This system claims all who enter. This is your final warning." "The same," message repeated in English, then Mandarin, then Japanese. But as the transmission continued, the languages became stranger, more complex. The universal translator struggled, displaying fragments of meaning on the screens around the bridge. Chief Engineer Kim Tae-ho, a stocky man with grease-stained coveralls and intelligent eyes, looked up from his diagnostic tablet. "Captain, some of these energy signatures are off the charts. Whatever's powering this thing, it's not using any technology I recognize." Dr. Choi So-young, the ship's xenoarchaeologist, was already running detailed scans from her science station. Her fingers danced across the holographic displays as data streamed past in glowing columns. "This is incredible," she whispered, almost to herself. "The construction materials, the power signatures, even the linguistic patterns, they're from the predecessor era." "The what now?" asked Security Chief Nam Woo-jin, looking up from where he had been checking the ship's defensive systems. His military training made him suspicious of anything he couldn't shoot or understand. "The predecessors," Dr. Choi explained, her voice filled with academic excitement despite the ominous circumstances. "They were the first spacefaring civilizations in this galaxy. We've only found fragments of their technology before, mostly on dead worlds. But this is a complete structure." The beacon's message continued cycling through languages, and with each repetition, the crew could hear something else beneath the words. A sound like distant screaming, or perhaps the wailing of stellar winds through the void. It made their skin crawl and their hearts race with primal fear. Lieutenant Bei Jin-woo, manning the tactical station, ran his hands through his black hair nervously. "Sir, I have to ask, shouldn't we at least consider the possibility that this warning is legitimate? I mean, if hundreds of civilizations thought this place was dangerous enough to build a warning beacon, that's exactly why we're here, Lieutenant," Captain Lee replied firmly. "The Terran Colonial Authority didn't send us 10,000 light years from Earth to turn around at the first sign of danger. We're explorers, not cowards." Their alien crew members were less enthusiastic. Vextar, the ship's reptilian navigator, had been growing increasingly agitated as they approached the beacon. His scales had shifted from their normal green to a mottled yellow-brown that indicated extreme stress in his species. "Captain Lee," Vextar hissed, his forked tongue tasting the air nervously, "my people have stories about systems like this, places where ships go to die. The wise heed such warnings." The ship's other alien crew member, a crystalline being named Quindar, who served as their stellar cartographer, chimed in with a sound like breaking glass. "The Vextar speaks truth, Captain. My kind has mapped this region for millennia. We have always avoided this system. There are legends. Legends aren't facts, Captain Lee interrupted, though he couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them from within the beacon's pulsing light. Facts are what we came here to discover. Engineer Kim checked his readings again, frowning at what he saw. Captain, the beacon's energy output is increasing. It's almost like it's reacting to our presence. As if summoned by his words, the beacon's red light began to pulse faster, more urgently. The warning message grew louder, more insistent, and now they could all hear the screaming beneath it. Not the screaming of wind, but of voices. Thousands of voices, crying out in terror and despair. Communications Officer Park Minji suddenly yanked off her headset, her face white with shock. Captain, I'm picking up something else in the transmission. It's not part of the original message. What is it, Officer Park? Sir, it sounds like recent transmissions. Ships that have been here before us. I can hear distress. Calls, final messages. She paused, her voice shaking. Captain, some of these transmissions are only days old. The bridge fell silent except for the ominous pulsing of the beacon and the underlying chorus of the doomed. Captain Lee felt a chill run down his spine, but his resolve remained firm. Humanity had not reached the stars by backing down from challenges. Plot. A course for the inner system, he ordered. Whatever's in there, we're going to find it. Captain, please, Lieutenant Bay pleaded one more time. Maybe we should call for backup, or at least report our position to command. Lieutenant, we are backup, Captain Lee replied grimly. The authorities sent us because we're the best they have, and right now, we're the only thing standing between Earth and whatever's hiding in that system. As the Starbound moved past the ancient beacon, its warning message reached a crescendo of terror and despair. The red light flashed one final time, so bright it illuminated the entire bridge in bloody crimson, and then seemed to dim slightly, as if accepting their fate. Behind them, the beacon resumed its eternal vigil, waiting for the next ship to ignore its warning. And in the darkness ahead, something ancient and hungry stirred, sensing the approach of fresh prey after so many years of patient waiting. Dr. Choi So-young's hands trembled as she adjusted the viewscreen's resolution, hoping against hope that what she was seeing was some kind of optical illusion. But no matter how she calibrated the sensors, the nightmare remained the same. Spread out before them like a cosmic cemetery was the largest collection of dead spacecraft anyone had ever witnessed. Sweet Mother of Earth, breathed Pilot Oh Se-jin, his voice barely above a whisper. How many ships are out there? The red giant star cast an eerie crimson glow across the floating graveyard, its dying light reflecting off thousands of metallic hulls. Ships of every size and design drifted silently in the star's gravity well, locked in eternal orbits around their stellar tomb. Some vessels were massive, easily 10 times the size of the Starbound, while others were small single-person craft no bigger than shuttles. Science Officer Yoon Jae-min worked frantically at his console, trying to catalogue what they were seeing. His usually steady hands shook as he input data. Captain, preliminary scans show at least 3,000 individual vessels, maybe more. Some of the larger ships are blocking my sensors. Captain Lee moved closer to the main view screen, his experienced eye taking in the variety of designs. He had studied alien architecture during his academy days, but some of these ships were unlike anything in the databases. Sleek vessels that looked like they were grown rather than built floated alongside. Angular warships bristling with weapon ports. Elegant civilian transports drifted next to exploration vessels covered in sensor arrays. Look at that one. Engineer Kim pointed to a massive ship that looked like a crystal cathedral floating in space. The energy readings are off the charts. That thing could power a small planet. Dr. Choi was already running detailed scans, her archaeological training kicking in despite her fear. Captain, I'm seeing design elements that predate known galactic civilization by thousands of years. Some of these ships, they're from the precursor races. The bridge fell silent. Every human in space knew the stories of the precursors, the legendary first starfaring civilizations who had supposedly ruled the galaxy millions of years ago. Most scientists considered them myths, stories told by primitive cultures to explain ancient ruins. But here was proof that they had been real. Life. Signs. Captain Lee asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Communications Officer Park Min-ji checked her readings twice before responding. No biological life signs detected, sir. But that's the strange part. Most of these ships still have active power signatures. Their life support systems are running. Artificial gravity is functioning. Even their lights are on. Lieutenant Bei Jin-woo studied his tactical displays with growing concern. Captain, some of these ships have been maintaining power for thousands of years. That's impossible with any known technology. Security Chief Nam Woo-jin, ever practical, voiced what they were all thinking. Where are the crews? You don't just abandon perfectly good spacecraft in the middle of nowhere. Captain Lee made his decision. We're going aboard one of these ships. Lieutenant Bei, select a target. Something small enough to investigate, but large enough to have meaningful records. Sir, is that wise? Asked Dr. Choi. We don't know what happened to the original crews. That's exactly why we need to find out, Lee replied firmly. Yoon, prep the shuttle, standard away team. Myself, Dr. Choi, Engineer Kim, and Chief Nam. Everyone else stays on the Starbound and monitors our situation. They chose a mid-sized vessel that appeared to be of unknown origin. It was sleek and organic-looking, almost like a giant metal seed floating in space. The shuttle docked easily. Whoever built the ship had used universal docking standards that were still common today. The airlock cycled, and the away team stepped aboard the ghost ship. Their magnetic boots clanked against the metal deck plating. As they moved through corridors that hummed with active power, emergency lighting cast long shadows on the walls, and the air recycling systems whispered like distant voices in the darkness. Gravity is Earth normal, reported Engineer Kim, checking his instruments. Atmosphere is breathable, though it smells old, like it's been recycling for centuries. They moved deeper into the ship, following what appeared to be the main corridor toward the command section. Personal quarters lined both sides of the hallway, their doors standing open like empty mouths. Dr. Choi stopped at one of the rooms, her archaeological curiosity overcoming her fear. Captain, you need to see this, she called softly. The room was clearly someone's private quarters, but whoever had lived there was gone. Personal belongings were scattered around, what looked like family photographs showing a species with 4 arms and crystalline features, clothing made from some kind of shimmering fabric, and half-eaten meals that somehow hadn't decayed despite the passage of time. It's like they just stepped out for a moment, whispered Engineer Kim, examining the preservation technology that was keeping everything fresh. But according to the ship's logs, this vessel has been here for over 1,000 years. Security. Chief Nam kept his weapon ready as they continued their exploration. His military instincts were screaming that something was very wrong. Ships didn't just empty themselves, and crews didn't vanish without leaving some trace behind. They reached the bridge, and Engineer Kim immediately went to work on the ship's computer systems. The alien technology was sophisticated, but not incompatible with human systems. After several minutes of careful work, he managed to access the final log entries. Got it, he announced. But Captain, you're not going to like this. The voice that came through the speakers was clearly alien, but the universal translator rendered it in crisp English. The tone was desperate, terrified. Day 47 since we entered this cursed system. The others are gone now. We can feel them in our minds calling to us, trying to make us join them. The captain was the first to go. She just walked to the airlock and opened it, smiling like she was going home. We tried to stop her, but she was so strong, so determined. They're coming for us now. We can hear them whispering. Tell our families we tried to warn the others not to come here. Tell them we... The log cut off abruptly, ending in electronic static. The away team stood in shocked silence for several moments. Finally, Nam Woo-jin spoke. Tried to warn whom? And who are they? Dr. Choi was already pulling up more data. Captain, I'm seeing similar patterns in the other accessible ship logs. Crews reporting strange mental influences. People walking into space voluntarily. Final messages cut off mid-sentence. Something made them abandon their ships, Captain. Lee realized. But what, and where did they go? They investigated 2 more vessels with the same results. Empty ships, preserved belongings, panicked final log entries. and no trace of what had happened to thousands of crew members from dozens of different species. Each ship told the same story of gradual mental breakdown and voluntary departure into the vacuum of space. Back aboard the Starbound, the crew was growing increasingly nervous. Their alien crew members, Vextar and Quindar, were particularly agitated. "Captain," Dr. Choi reported as they returned to the bridge, "I've been analyzing the log entries from 17 different ships. The pattern is always the same. Crews report hearing voices, feeling compelled to leave their vessels, and then they just do it. They walk out airlocks, take shuttles into space, anything to get away from their ships." "But get away to where?" asked Lieutenant Bay. "There's nowhere to go in this system except that dying star." Communications Officer Park Minji suddenly looked up from her station, her face pale. "Captain, I'm detecting something. Energy signatures are spiking throughout the graveyard. It's like the ships are waking up." As if responding to her words, lights began flickering on across the ship graveyard. Vessels that had been dark for centuries suddenly blazed with activity. Navigation lights blinked in sequence, and long-range sensors detected massive power buildups throughout the fleet of ghost ships. "Captain," Engineer Kim called from his station, "something's happening to our own systems. I'm getting feedback through our sensor array." The Starbound's lights flickered, and for a moment the crew could swear they heard something, whispers, at the edge of perception, calling them to come outside to leave their ship and join the others in the beautiful darkness between the stars. Captain Lee gripped his command chair as the ship shuddered. Whatever had claimed the crews of these thousands of vessels was waking up, and it had noticed their presence. The Starbound lurched violently to one side, throwing Captain Lee against his command chair as the ship's engines suddenly went silent. The familiar hum of the quantum drives that had carried them across the galaxy died with a mechanical whine that sounded almost like a scream. "What the hell just happened?" Lee shouted, grabbing his communicator as sparks flew from several bridge consoles. The emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in an ominous red glow that reminded him uncomfortably of the ancient beacon's warning. Chief Engineer Kim Taeho's voice crackled through the comm system, distorted by static and interference. "Captain, we've got a massive problem down here. The quantum field generators just shut down completely. It's like something reached inside our engines and turned them off." "That's impossible," Lieutenant Bei Jin-woo called from his tactical station, his hands flying over the controls as he tried to restore power to the ship's defensive systems. "Our engines are shielded against any known form of interference." "Well, someone forgot to tell whatever's out there about our shielding," Kim's voice came back, tight with panic. "Sir, I'm seeing energy patterns I've never encountered before. They're not following any known laws of physics." Pilot Oh Se-jin was frantically working at his controls, trying to restart the navigation systems. "Captain, we're dead in space. Whatever hit us, it's like it knew exactly how to shut us down." Dr. Choi So-young looked up from her science station, her face pale in the emergency lighting. "Captain, the energy readings from the graveyard are spiking beyond anything we've recorded, but it's not coming from the ships anymore." She transferred her readings to the main view screen, and the entire bridge crew gasped in horror. Rising from the surface of the dying red giant star were structures of impossible size and complexity. They looked like a cross between massive, mechanical towers and organic growths, reaching out from the star's corona like the fingers of some cosmic hand. "Dear God," whispered Communications Officer Park Minji, her voice barely audible over the crackling of damaged systems. "How big are those things?" Science Officer Yoon Jae-min ran calculations on his partially functioning console. "Each structure is at least 50 kilometers tall, and they're emerging from inside the star itself. Captain, this is beyond any technology. We know. These things are operating in temperatures that would vaporize any known material." The structures continued to rise, their surfaces covered in the same ancient symbols they had seen on the warning beacon. As they emerged fully from the star's surface, energy began to flow between them in brilliant arcs of light that put the star's own radiance to shame. "Captain," Dr. Choi's voice was barely a whisper, "I don't think this is just a graveyard. I think it's a trap. Those structures, the way they're positioned around the star, the energy patterns, this entire system is artificial. It's been designed." The horrifying truth hit Captain Lee like a physical blow. They hadn't stumbled into a ship graveyard by accident. Every vessel floating in this cosmic cemetery had been deliberately lured here, just as they had been. The ancient beacon hadn't been a warning to stay away. It had been bait, designed to attract curious explorers who would ignore the obvious danger. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission," Park Minji reported, her voice shaking as she adjusted her damaged equipment. "It's coming from the central structure, the largest one rising from the star." "Put it through," Captain Lee ordered. Though every instinct told him he didn't want to hear what was coming, the voice that filled the bridge spoke in perfect Korean. But there was something wrong with it. It was too smooth, too knowing, like it had been studying human speech patterns for a very long time. "Welcome, humans of the vessel Starbound. We have been waiting so very long for new minds to feed upon. Your stubborn curiosity has delivered you to us perfectly, just as it has delivered so many others over the millennia." Security Chief Nam Woo-jin drew his weapon instinctively, though he knew bullets would be useless against whatever was speaking to them. "Who are you? What do you want?" The voice continued as if he hadn't spoken. "We are the Devourers, the ones who consume thought itself. We have waited in this prison for ages beyond counting, sustained by the minds of those foolish enough to ignore our warnings, and now fresh consciousness has come to feed us." Lieutenant Bay's tactical display suddenly exploded into activity. "Captain, multiple contacts approaching, but they're not showing up as solid matter. They're some kind of energy formation." Through the view screen, the crew watched in growing terror as shapes began to emerge from the massive structures. They looked like living light, flowing and shifting as they moved through space. The entities had no fixed form, sometimes appearing as streams of brilliant energy, other times coalescing into vaguely humanoid shapes that hurt to look at directly. "They're beautiful," whispered pilot Oh Se-jin, his voice dreamy and distant. "Look how they dance between the stars." "Se-jin, don't. Look at them directly," Dr. Choi shouted, but it was too late. The pilot's eyes had gone glassy, and he was staring at the entities with an expression of rapture. The first entity reached the Starbound and simply passed through the hull as if the reinforced metal were nothing more than air. The moment it entered the ship, their alien crew members began to collapse. Vextar, their reptilian navigator, was the first to fall. His scaled body convulsed once, then went completely still. His eyes remained open, but they were empty, staring at nothing. The intelligence that had once resided behind them was simply gone. "Vextar," Captain Lee shouted, rushing to the alien's side. But when he tried to check for a pulse, he found that while the body was still alive, still breathing, there was nothing left inside. It was like looking at an empty shell. Quindar, their crystalline cartographer, suffered the same fate. The sex. Beautiful geometric patterns that had always played across his surface went dark, and his body became nothing more than a lifeless crystal formation. The entity that had drained them pulsed with a brighter light, as if it had been fed by consuming their minds. Here it turned toward the remaining crew members, and Captain Lee could swear he saw something like hunger in its shifting form. But then something strange happened. As the entity approached Engineer Kim, who was backing away in terror, it suddenly recoiled. A sound like electronic screaming filled the bridge, and the creature writhed as if in pain. "What's happening?" gasped Nam Woo-jin, watching as another entity attempted to approach Communications Officer Park Minji, only to pull back with the same apparent distress. Dr. Choi was frantically scanning the entities with her equipment. "Captain, their energy, beings that feed on neural patterns, on consciousness itself. But something about human brain activity is causing them pain. Our thought processes are different from other species, more chaotic, less organized. More entities flowed through the ship's hull, trying to approach the human crew members. But each time they got close, they recoiled in what could only be described as agony. Their forms flickered and distorted, and that electronic screaming filled the air. Our minds are like poison to them, Captain Lee realized. Every other species in the galaxy thinks in logical, ordered patterns. But humans, that we're chaotic. We think about 17 different things at once, mix emotions with logic, dream while we're awake. Lieutenant Bay laughed, a sound edged with hysteria. So we're too crazy to be mind-controlled properly. Essentially, yes, Dr. Choi confirmed, but I don't think it's going to save us. They're adapting, learning how to approach us without triggering our mental defenses. Indeed, the entities were beginning to change their tactics. Instead of trying to drain the humans directly, they were surrounding them, probing for weaknesses. And slowly the crew could feel their influence growing stronger. Captain Lee felt his thoughts beginning to slow, becoming more organized, more logical. The entities were trying to force human minds into patterns they could consume. It was a battle for consciousness itself, and they were losing. "Fight it!" he shouted to his crew. "Think about everything at once. Don't let them organize your thoughts." But even as he spoke, he could feel his own mind being pulled into alien patterns. The trap was closing, and escape seemed impossible. Dr. Choi So-young watched in fascination and terror as Engineer Kim Tae-ho backed away from one of the glowing entities, his mouth running a mile a minute as his mind raced through a dozen different topics at once. The quantum field generators work by manipulating space-time through controlled singularities, which reminds me of that old Earth movie where the guy gets stuck in a time loop. You know, the one with the groundhog. And speaking of groundhogs, my sister used to have this pet hamster that would run on its wheel all night, making this squeaking sound that drove everyone crazy. The energy being that had been approaching him suddenly jerked backward as if it had touched a live wire. Its form flickered and distorted, and that electronic screaming sound filled the air again. The creature seemed to be in genuine pain, its light pulsing erratically. "That's it," Dr. Choi shouted over the chaos. "Kim, keep talking. Don't let your thoughts follow any logical pattern." Captain Lee was beginning to understand what was happening. Every time one of his crew members let their mind wander in the chaotic, unpredictable way that was uniquely human, the entities couldn't handle it. It was like trying to drink from a fire hose that kept changing direction. Our brains are wired differently, he realized, dodging another entity that was trying to wrap itself around his head like some kind of psychic parasite. Every other species in the galaxy thinks in neat, organized patterns, but humans, we're beautiful disasters. Lieutenant Bei Jin-woo finished with a laugh that bordered on hysteria. He was frantically trying to keep his thoughts scattered, jumping from his military training to his grandmother's cooking, to the lyrics of an old pop song he'd heard as a teenager. Our minds are like storms, unpredictable, chaotic, impossible to pin down. The strategy was working, but barely. The entities were learning, adapting to their unusual prey. Instead of trying to drain entire human minds at once, they began focusing their attacks, attempting to isolate single streams of thought that they could process. Communications Officer Park Min-ji screamed as one of the creatures wrapped itself around her head like a crown of living light. She could feel it trying to force her thoughts into linear patterns, trying to make her think about just one thing at a time so it could feed. "No," she gasped, fighting against the alien influence. "I won't let you organize me." Following Captain Lee's shouted instructions, she began to deliberately scatter her thoughts in every direction at once. She recited her favorite poem from school while simultaneously calculating hyperspace navigation coordinates and remembering her grandmother's recipe for kimchi. She thought about her first kiss while reviewing communications protocols and wondering if it would rain tomorrow. The entity recoiled as if it had been burned, its form becoming unstable as it tried to process the impossible mixture of logic, emotion, memory, and imagination that made up human consciousness. But the effort was exhausting. Security Chief Nam Woo-jin was already sweating profusely, his face strained with concentration as he forced his mind to jump between memories of military combat training and scenes from ancient Earth comedy shows. "Captain, I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. It's like trying to think in 17 different languages at once." More entities were pouring from the massive structures around the dying star, drawn by the promise of fresh minds to consume. The bridge of the Starbound was becoming crowded with the glowing creatures, all of them probing for weaknesses in the humans' chaotic mental defenses. Science Officer Yoon Jae-min was backed against his console, muttering rapidly as he tried to keep his thoughts scattered. The periodic table of elements has 118 known elements, which reminds me of that time I got lost in Seoul Station when I was 7 years old, and there was this street musician playing the most beautiful violin music I'd ever heard, and it made me think about wave frequencies and how sound travels through different mediums. The entity stalking him wavered, unable to lock onto any single thread of his consciousness long enough to drain it. Engineer Kim, meanwhile, had made a discovery that could change everything. While part of his mind was busy confusing the creatures with random thoughts about starship maintenance and childhood pets, another part was analyzing the energy patterns flowing between the massive structures around the star. "Captain!" he called, out, not stopping his stream of consciousness rambling. "I figured it out. This whole system isn't just a prison, it's a feeding mechanism. Those structures channel the mental energy from consumed minds and store it. But there's a control system, and I think I can access it." Dr. Choi looked up from where she was fending off her own attacker by rapidly switching between archaeological theories and memories of her first day at the academy. "Kim, if you interfere with their containment system, we might make things worse. Or we might trap them," Captain Lee realized, the plan forming in his mind even as he fought to keep his thoughts chaotic enough to resist the entity's influence. "These things can't handle human consciousness because we're too unpredictable. But what if we fed that unpredictability directly into their prison system?" The idea was crazy, dangerous, and completely illogical. In other words, it was perfectly human. Lieutenant Bay was the first to understand what the captain was suggesting. "You want to use our minds as weapons? Turn our own chaos against them?" "Exactly," Lee confirmed, even as another entity made a grab for his consciousness. "If we can connect our neural patterns to their containment system, our chaotic thoughts will spread through their entire network. It'll be like introducing a virus into their collective consciousness." Pilot Oh Se-jin, who had been fighting his own battle against an entity trying to drain his memories of flight training, mixed with his love of ancient Earth music, suddenly spoke up. "Captain, that's suicide. If we link our minds to their system, we might never be able to disconnect." "Maybe," Lee admitted. "But right now, we're going to die anyway. At least this way, we can make sure these things never hurt anyone else." The entities seemed to sense that the humans were planning something. Their attacks became more focused, more desperate. Several of them combined their efforts, trying to overwhelm the crew's mental defenses through sheer numbers. Park Min-ji collapsed to her knees as three entities surrounded her, their combined influence trying to force her mind into the ordered patterns they could digest. "I can't hold them off much longer." "Kim, how long do you need to access their control system?" Captain Lee shouted over the electronic screaming of the frustrated creatures. "Give me 2 minutes." Kim replied, his hands flying over his engineering console, while another part of his mind continued its random babbling about quantum mechanics and childhood memories. "We don't have 2 minutes, Nam Woo-jin gasped, his mental defenses beginning to crack under the sustained assault. That's when Dr. Choi made a decision that would save them all. "Everyone, link hands. If we combine our chaotic thought patterns, we might be able to amplify the effect." The crew of the Starbound joined hands in a circle on the bridge, their minds still scattered and chaotic but now connected. The effect was immediate and devastating to the entities. The combined chaos of 6 human minds, thinking about everything and nothing at once, created a psychic storm that sent the creatures reeling. But the real battle was just beginning. Engineer Kim had found the access point to the ancient containment system, and now they had to make the most dangerous decision of their lives, whether to sacrifice themselves to save the galaxy from these cosmic predators. "Everyone ready?" Captain Lee asked, though he already knew the answer. They were human, which meant they were born ready for impossible odds and suicidal plans. "Let's give these things the worst case of mental indigestion in galactic history," Lieutenant Bay said, with a grin that was equal parts terrified and determined. The final phase of their desperate plan was about to begin. Captain Lee Hyun-woo gripped the arms of his command chair as the energy beings pressed their attack with renewed fury. The bridge of the Starbound was now filled with dozens of the glowing creatures, their forms shifting and writhing as they tried to find a way past the humans' chaotic mental defenses. "Kim, how's that connection coming?" Lee shouted over the electronic screaming of the frustrated entities. Engineer Kim Tae-ho's hands were dancing across his console so fast they were almost a blur. Sweat poured down his face as he worked to establish a link between the ship's neural interface and the ancient containment system. "Almost there, Captain, But this is going to be like sticking our brains into a cosmic blender. Better than letting these things loose on the galaxy, Security Chief Nam Wu-jin gasped, his mental defenses beginning to crack under the sustained assault. 3 entities had surrounded him, trying to force his thoughts into orderly patterns they could digest. Dr. Choi So-young was fighting her own battle, deliberately mixing her memories of xenoarchaeological discoveries with her childhood fear of the monster she used to imagine lived under her bed. Captain, once we link with their system, there might be no way back. We could be trapped in there forever. Then we make sure it counts, Lee replied grimly. If we're going down, we're taking these cosmic vampires with us. The ship's AI suddenly spoke up, its voice calm despite the chaos around them. Neural interface connections established. Warning, this procedure has never been attempted by human subjects. Psychological damage is likely. We're already psychologically damaged, Lieutenant Bei Jinwoo said with a laugh that bordered on hysteria. We're the species that looked at the vacuum of space and decided to go swimming in it. Engineer Kim made the final connection, and suddenly every human on the bridge felt their consciousness expand beyond their bodies. It was like being turned inside out and then scattered across the cosmos. For a terrifying moment, they could feel their individual thoughts being pulled toward the massive structures around the dying star. But instead of being consumed, something incredible happened. The ancient containment system, designed to hold and process the ordered thoughts of logical species, suddenly found itself flooded with pure human chaos. Dr. Choi's consciousness poured into the system like a river of beautiful madness. Her memories of discovering ancient alien artifacts mixed with her childhood fears, her scientific training combined with her dreams of becoming a dancer when she was 5 years old. She thought about quantum physics while remembering the taste of her mother's soup and wondering if aliens ever got homesick. Lieutenant Bei channeled his tactical training into the system, but mixed it with his secret love of ancient Earth poetry. Military strategies flowed alongside verses about cherry blossoms and lonely mountains. His analysis of enemy ship movements got tangled up with haikus about springtime rain. Communications Officer Park Min-ji found herself thinking about hyperspace, communication protocols while simultaneously planning the perfect dinner menu, and remembering the first time she saw snow as a child. Her technical knowledge became inseparable from her artistic dreams and emotional memories. The effect on the energy beings was immediate and catastrophic. These creatures had evolved to feed on minds that thought in neat, organized patterns. They were like predators, designed to hunt in still water, suddenly finding themselves in the middle of a hurricane. "It's working," Engineer Kim shouted, even as his own consciousness mixed memories of starship engines with his collection of vintage Earth music and his grandmother's stories about the old country. "They can't process our thoughts. We're like mental static." To them! The entities began to retreat, but they quickly discovered there was nowhere to go. The containment system that had been their feeding ground for millennia had become a maze of human irrationality. Every pathway they tried to follow led to dead ends of contradictory thoughts and impossible emotions. One entity tried to escape through what it thought was a memory of tactical procedures, only to find itself trapped in Lieutenant Bei's recollection of a poem about lonely mountains. Another attempted to follow Dr. Choi's scientific knowledge, but got lost in her childhood fear of the dark, mixed with her wonder at discovering her first alien artifact. "They're panicking," Science Officer Yoon Jae-min observed, his own mind contributing a stream of consciousness that mixed stellar cartography with his memories of playing soccer as a teenager and his theories about why alien food always tasted like metal. The ancient structures around the dying star began to pulse erratically, their energy patterns becoming chaotic as human consciousness flooded their systems. Thousands of years of carefully organized mental energy were being scrambled by the beautiful disaster of human thought. "Warning, containment system overload imminent," the ship's AI announced. "Energy cascade failure in 30 seconds. Captain Lee made the hardest decision of his life. "Do it! Collapse the whole system!" "Sir, we might not survive the feedback," Engineer Kim warned. "Then we make sure our last act counts for something." Kim triggered the cascade failure, and the ancient containment network began to collapse in on itself. But instead of releasing the trapped entities, the system folded inward, creating a prison made entirely of human consciousness. The energy beings found themselves trapped in an endless maze where nothing made sense, where emotions mixed with logic, where memories became dreams and dreams became reality. The creatures that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia were now prisoners in a realm of pure human chaos, where every thought led to 17 other thoughts, where scientific facts danced with childhood fantasies, and where the only constant was beautiful, maddening unpredictability. The Starbound's engines suddenly roared back to life as the system's hold on them failed. Emergency power kicked in, and the ship began to pull away from the dying star and its graveyard of lost vessels. "Status report," Captain Lee called out, shaking his head to clear the lingering effects of the neural link. "Engines at 60%, reported pilot Osei-jin, his voice weak but relieved. "We can make it to the nearest space station. The Ida entities?" asked Dr. Choi. Engineer Kim checked his readings. "Trapped. The containment system has sealed itself using our thought patterns as the lock. They're stuck in there with 6 human minds worth of beautiful insanity." Lieutenant Bay laughed, a sound of pure relief. "So let me get this straight. We ignored an ancient warning, broke into a cosmic prison, and defeated energy vampires by being too mentally unstable to eat properly." "That's about the size of it," Captain Lee confirmed, looking back at the dying star through the viewscreen. It was pulsing now with an erratic rhythm that seemed almost human. "What about all those other ships?" Park Minji asked, gesturing toward the graveyard they were leaving behind. "They'll stay as a memorial," Lee decided, "and as a warning to anyone else who might be tempted to ignore the obvious danger signs." As the Starbound prepared to jump to hyperspace, Captain Lee made his final log entry about their encounter. "Personal log, Captain Lee Hyunwoo. We have successfully contained a threat that has plagued the galaxy for thousands of years. The method was unconventional. It turns out that humanity's greatest weakness, our inability to think in straight lines, is also our greatest strength. Sometimes the universe needs someone crazy enough to ignore the warnings and stubborn enough to find a solution that makes no logical sense." Behind them, the ancient beacon continued its eternal broadcast, but now it carried an additional message. Anyone passing through that region of space would hear, in dozens of languages, including Korean, "The humans have paid the price. The danger is contained. Turn back, but know that some were brave enough not to." The crew of the Starbound had learned something important about themselves and their species. In a galaxy full of logical, ordered civilizations, sometimes it took the beautifully chaotic humans to solve problems that rational thinking couldn't handle. As they jumped to hyperspace, leaving the graveyard and its trapped horrors behind, they carried with them the knowledge that being human, with all its contradictions, emotions, and glorious insanity, was not a weakness to be overcome, but a strength to be celebrated. The universe was a little bit safer, because 6 humans had been too stubborn to listen to warnings and too crazy to be properly mind-controlled, and sometimes that's exactly what the galaxy needed. The end.